What's up, guys? I'm Salty Circus, and I'm here with Adley with the Millennial Soapbox. Basically, we're here doing a podcast today for you guys with topics that you've picked out. And just to explain a little bit about us, we met in the summer, over the summer, and we kind of met through mutual friends, and we figured out that we were both conservative for the win. So that was neat. And just a little background about myself. If you don't know who I am, I'm Cosette, also the Salty Circus. And I used to be a Democratic liberal socialist, and I chose to walk away because I saw all of the hypocrisies as I grew up and grew out of that phase. And Adley here is... what are you? Lifelong conservative, I guess?
Yeah, so along those lines. I grew up in a really small town. I come from like cowboy and farming stock, so just conservative, kind of really God-fearing people. So that's how I grew up, was very, very much conservative in a small town. And I went to a school that was very agricultural based. So just kind of one of those towns I was talking that we're so familiar with, I suppose you could say.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. But yeah, we have a full show planned out for us today. Just to explain a little bit of the format, a little bit of the itinerary to let you guys know what we have planned for you. So essentially, we're going to be doing this in different segments. First of all, we're going to be doing 2 10-minute segments, one on border security, and then the second one on the political correctness culture, bureaucracy, and media bias. Then we'll be doing a speed round of 5 random topics given to us by you, the viewers. Each of us will get a 1-minute response for each of those speed rounds. Then we'll close up the segments with one last 10-minute segment on the ideals and the history of the Democratic Party. And then to close out the entire episode today, we'll be doing our political version of Sleep, Kiss, Kill with the Democratic candidates for president. Now, 2 very important things that we want to emphasize in this podcast, in this episode, is that each of us will have a statement at the end of each segment to make sure that we end with a solution instead of just complaining and criticizing whatever politician, whatever policy that we'll be talking about. And the second thing being is all these topics that we'll be talking about have been given to us by you, the viewers, whether it be through polls, whether it be through direct messages or comments. So we want to make sure that you guys know that we really did take your guys' suggestions into account.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adley, for the itinerary. So moving on to our first segment today will be the topic chosen by you guys, border security, illegal immigration, and immigration reform. I've got an article here, and it talks about how the immigration cases are piling over 1 million in number, and we know there are judges dedicated specifically for these cases. Let me read you a section from this article here.
Where's this coming from again?
New York Times.
Oh, good old NY Times.
All right. So let's see. The filing is the latest jab in the long-running fight between the outspoken union and the Justice Department, which has pressured the immigration judges to more quickly address a backlog of immigration cases that reached 1 million this year. Unlike other judges, immigration judges are under the Justice Department as opposed to the judicial branch. The union has long lobbied for its independence. While the administration has hired more judges, the union has long criticized the Trump administration for putting burdensome expectations on its workforce, including a requirement to complete 700 cases a year. Adley, how do you respond to that?
So this might take a little bit longer than the 2 minutes that have been allotted, but I think this is a really important subject that we've been given. So essentially what it is these immigration cases that have been piling up over the years, it said that there's well over 1 million cases. We'll only be able to get through about 700 cases a year. That means that they're going to continue to pile up. That means that we're going to be continually to be backed up, and we're not going to be able to get to the end of it ever at this rate, essentially. One thing that we have to do is we have to stop the bleeding, essentially, quote unquote, with these cases. Then two, we have to reform the way that we look at and deal with immigration, and that would also help us to lessen the number of cases that we have with the immigration and such like that. Now, obviously, you and I have talked about this. Two great. We've talked about this for hours and hours and hours. And the way you stop the bleeding is you have to bring a halt to immigration. Obviously, we're not talking about closing down the borders or anything like that, but we are talking about putting some sort of barricade. Trump said we need to put some sort of a wall. Some people say that we need to have some sort of technological wall with just more drones and such like that, so we can monitor the border a little bit better. Obviously, I believe that a physical barrier being a wall would be the best choice for us, simply because it's been proven to work. A lot of people on the left are saying that a wall will not work. Well, if you look at another wall that has been very effective in the past about 20, 30 years in Israel, back when Israel was first became a Jewish state, sovereign Jewish state, a lot of people from out of Palestine will come across the border and do suicide bombers across in Israel at a very high rate. Now, after Israel started building the borders and started building up security, those suicide bombers have almost ceased to exist. Now, obviously, I'm not like equating illegal immigrants with the PLO or like any type of terrorist organization, but it does show that the wall does work. Apart from that, there's been complaints about the cost of it. They're saying that it's too expensive. Well, the highest estimate of that wall that we've been talking about was $21.6 billion. Now, we have a $4.4 trillion budget, and quite honestly, that's like if you, and like, let's say that you were married, you and your husband made $440,000 a year, and you asked him for about $2,000 to make a fence around the house. So we can see that the cost isn't necessarily a problem, and I mean, in the end, NBC fact checkers, they've said that we're losing close to about $58 billion every year in illegal immigration. So, I mean, $21 billion, over $58 billion lost every year. I mean, nearly we're making that up in 4 months. So I think that a wall would be the very best deal for stopping illegal immigration at that point, correct?
I agree with you. I agree. One thing that I do notice about this article here, the left complains about this issue of having like a huge load of these cases, but they don't want a wall. They don't want to stop the bleeding. They don't understand that the two correlate. And so I think that's a huge, like, it's a willing ignorance at that point. They're refusing to see the obvious solution here. But on that, in this article, it does mention a lot about white nationalism. Is building a wall something that would appeal to the white nationalist ideal?
I mean, the micro percentage of Americans that are white nationalist or believe that white people should be the superior race or whatever the case may be, like, I assume that is something that they would want. The 0.002% of America that are white nationalists. I mean, yes, by that ideal, yes, it would be a very kind of an isolationist tactic in the fact that we'd be trying to cut ourselves off from the outside world because that white nationalists believe to be a superior race. However, when people equate the larger part of America, whether it be Republicans, whether it be Trump himself, as white nationalists, that's just ridiculous. I mean, we can see simply by his policies that he's worked to help people of different skin colors. I mean, the Latin and Black unemployment rates are the lowest they've ever been in the history of America. I mean, when Donald Trump first assigned his cabinet, I believe that 4 or 5 of his cabinet positions were filled by people of different races, including a Middle Eastern gentleman. And so I don't see, when people say like, oh yeah, it's going to help white nationalism. Well, yeah, the 0.0003% of America that is white nationalist is, I mean, okay, but we're going to be helping the other 55% of America that believe we should have a wall as well,
Absolutely.
Like I said, we need to stop the bleeding, to have less cases as prescribed by the Department of Justice. We also need to reform the way that we look at immigration to have less causes. So, like I said, we already went over the stopping the bleeding, but to be able to reform it as well. I believe some of the biggest problems with immigration right now is we have so many illegal immigrants living in the United States right now. And the problem with it is, one, they're not paying into the system, so they're essentially leeching off our welfare state. They're leeching off of our healthcare plans as well, because they're not paying into the system. They're not paying Social Security. They're not paying Medicare. They're not paying into those programs. And then, if they do commit a crime, we can't prosecute them here in the States because they're not U.S. citizens. We have to extradite them. We have to deport them. At this point in my life, and I'm willing to talk about this. I'm willing to think differently. But for right now, the best decision that I can think of is, for right now, people living in the United States that are legal immigrants, automatic citizenship. You have until the end of the year to go into the Social Security department and get your Social Security card, because right now there's so many people here in the United States that are legal immigrants. They've already built lives here. You can't really uproot them and take them away. That you can't do it. And so, if you were to give people citizenship, they'd be paying into the system at least now, because they're Social Security. They'd be paying taxes, and B, if there were crimes committed, we can prosecute them here in the United States because now they're citizens. Now, for future citizens, the problem is, I have friends I have friends that have tried to come from Honduras, from Nicaragua, and have tried to come to the States, and it's been a pain in the butt to try to help them to get through it. Like, they need sponsors, they need green cards, all those sorts of stuff. Like, you can get a green card a million different ways for being skilled labor and stuff like that. But then there's different requirements for each of them. There's waiting periods involved. It's just ridiculous. Quite honestly, I believe that we need to simplify it, because the problem is the reason why people are crossing the border illegally is because it's so difficult to come into the United States legally. I believe that if you can simply show proof of a clean record, that you have no criminal history, that you have no debt, come into the United States, you have 2 years to learn passable English, pass the citizenship exam, done, citizen. I think it's simple. If they can't do it, you leave. You can try to come back if you so choose, but I think that's reasonable. You come to the United States, you learn the language, and you pass the citizenship test. Because the reason why for no debt though, is because the problem is, a lot of people come to the United States, they'll take the money they'll learn, and they'll send it back to their families, or they'll send it back to pay off the debts that they did. And I think that if we're gonna have people come to the States, they're gonna stay here and they're gonna work here and make our economy better. Now, and the problem is, people think that Republicans have problems with immigration. They think they're racist. We have zero problems with immigration. We have a lot of problems with illegal immigration, because you're breaking the law. And then the left will counter and say, well, we're a nation of immigrants. Like, you guys came in on Ellis Island. Like, what's up? Yeah, but we came in legally. I mean, granted, they changed my last name so I'd sound more American, but I mean, I came in legally at least, They wrote down my name and I paid taxes. So, yes, we are a nation of immigrants, but we're a nation of legal immigrants. They came in, worked their butts off, paid their taxes, and did what they were supposed to do.
Right.
And so, I believe that the right of being an American citizen is a privilege, and to be able to receive that citizenship is a special thing. But I don't believe it should be an unattainable thing, and I don't think it should be a near impossible thing. And for a lot of Latin Americans, after seeing a lot of the requirements, I believe that it is a very difficult process and a very difficult situation that we do put especially Latin Americans, because that's where a lot of the immigration is coming from. So that's how I think we should stop the bleeding with the wall, and then reform the immigration so we can be able to get more people in legally. But I just wanted to transition from the border into our second segment. Obviously, this is having to do with political correctness, bureaucracy, media bias. I have an article for you here, because it's from The Economist, and it's addressed how political correctness has political correctness gone too far. It's by a young lady named Julia Simons. She's written for The Economist. She's written for a couple of different other publications. But essentially, she's talking about how America is drunk on virtue. At first, political correctness was a way of simply being more courteous to people of different backgrounds, whether it be skin color, culture, even like different types of mental and physical handicaps and such like that. Um, so it started off as some sort of a good movement, but she's arguing that it's gone too far. It's almost gotten to this point where it's almost like a cultural McCarthyism. Remember during the Red Scare in the 80s? And just for example, like the use of the word like snowflake and all the different type of political correctness. We can't call people short of a smaller stature different names and such like that, which is okay. But in your opinion, has political correctness gone too far in this day and age?
Oh man, I absolutely think that it's gone way too far, about 73 genders too far. So, Canada actually has a law that sends you to jail or fines you if you misgender somebody, even by accident. So it's like you could identify as an attack helicopter, I could identify as an Apache helicopter. People have to remember that or be fined. Jokes aside, though, I think it's unhealthy for our culture and it's unhealthy for our children. And what I mean by that is children need structure. They need structure, even something as abstract as language. They cannot be allowed to have their imaginations run amok. And because when they grow up in the real world, it doesn't work that way. There is structure, there is standard, and raising your kids to, be free spirited in the sense that that they can identify as whatever they want or possibly transition to whatever they want physically is extremely dangerous and unhealthy, and it actually, I believe, contributes to the high suicide and depression rate of teenagers these days. So I believe that political correctness is fascism masked as political correctness. I don't think it's healthy for this culture at all. I think it's controlling. Not to mention the Second Amendment. I mean the First Amendment, freedom of speech. It infringes on that quite a bit, especially if those rules in Canada were here. It wouldn't work. And one thing that I have noticed is that the trans community especially, they expect us to be okay with and get over the fact that that they are presenting themselves as something that we do not necessarily recognize and something that is foreign to us. But they cannot get over the fact that we don't have to cater to their PC needs.
No, and I completely agree with you. And the thing that kind of kills me about this whole political correctness culture, and like obviously you want to be courteous of someone, you don't want to be a bigot about someone's sexual preferences, meaning if someone is, in my opinion, if someone is homosexual, that's completely like, I may not agree with your lifestyle, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to discriminate against you based on your sexual preference. I have really good friends, I have family members that are homosexual, and although I may not agree with how they're living their life, I still love them. I still want what's best for them as well. But this whole PC culture and this media bias and all this kind of stuff that we've been talking about, it actually just reminds me of this case that's been coming out of Texas. Actually, I believe that you and I've talked about it before. I know that it's been in the news quite a bit, but it's on this legal custody battle in Texas that's been happening this last week over this little boy named James Younger. Now, just to be brief and overview it for our listeners, in Texas there is a woman named Ann Georgelis and a gentleman named Jeffrey Younger who were married. They are now divorced, and they have a little boy, a biological boy by the name of James. Now, Georgelis claims that this little boy suffers from gender dysphoria and thus calls him Luna. Now, the problem with that being is, from a young age, for example, there's a video of Jeffrey, the father, asking James, saying, "James, you're a boy, right?" And James says, "No, I'm a girl." And he says, "Okay, who told you you're a girl?" And he says, "Mom told me I'm a girl." And so so the argument is does the child really have gender dysphoria, or is it the mother that's telling the child that he is or she? The boy only dresses up as a girl and goes by the name Luna, which the only person in this entire world that calls him Luna is his mother when he's at her mother's house during custody. Now when James is with his father, he never dresses up as a boy. He doesn't answer the name Luna or anything like that. I don't know if you've heard about this. I know you've heard about this. I know we've talked about it before, but can you just give me like a quick minute or two in your response to what we've already been talking about in the younger case as well?
Yeah, I absolutely, this disgusts me because my dad used to, when he was little, like around, what is this boy's age? Around 7.
Mm-hmm.
So when my dad was around the same age, he used to dress up in my aunt's dresses when he was a little kid.
So his older sister?
Yeah, his sister. Okay. And when I was little, when I was around 7, 8, 9, I dressed up in boys' clothes and cut my hair short. And obviously I'm very feminine now, right, Adley? Don't answer that. I'm trying to say
you're a very elegant female.
Thank you.
Of course.
I'm trying to say here is like, if my grandparents saw my dad, or okay, if my dad saw me cut my hair short and dress into boys' clothes and said, oh, Cosette must be transgender. She must have gender dysphoria. Let's put her on hormone blockers and get her into surgery. Mm-hmm. My life would suck now because now I've grown out of it. I have passed that phase. Thank you, puberty. And I think it's just too dangerous. Like, kids that can't even consent to sex are getting sex changes. It doesn't make sense. It's child abuse.
Oh no, it doesn't make sense, and that's actually why there's this custody battle right now. Is because the mother wants to give the 7-year-old boy like hormone blockers and like do a transition into being a female. I mean, to be quite honest, that's a little early for me. I mean, we require, like, they're not adults until age 18. They can't give consent. They can't vote. I mean, they can't own a handgun until 21. They can't vote until 18. They can't drive until 16. And yet we're making them change their sexual identity and their gender at 7 years old. I think that's definitely different. But Cosette, what do you think would be a solution for this problem?
Oh man, Adley, I don't know. I think you should just burn the world at this point.
All right. That escalated quickly. We took that a little bit.
No, but very seriously, I think the solution is to wait until they're 18. They're consenting to the transition.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think that with me, it's a little bit different. For example, when we talk about gender dysphoria, it is a mental handicap, essentially. It's a mental disease that needs to be addressed. And I've heard arguments before that, for example, gender dysphoria, if it is a mental illness, then, for example, with people who are schizophrenic or people who have a different mental illness, we don't tell the schizophrenic that the voices they're hearing are real. I mean, that's not how you help a schizophrenic get over that, right. You know? But so with a person who has gender dysphoria, I mean, encouraging that form of thinking, I believe, would only elongate and prolong the problem. I mean, for example, I remember watching a talk show, and it was talking about a gentleman who had struggled with gender dysphoria, made the full transition, sex change operation, everything over to a woman, lived out his life as a woman for about 5, 6, 7, 8 years, was a full alcoholic, was taking tons of antidepressants, a ton of anxiety medicine because he couldn't make that change because it was just all in his head. It wasn't a change that was in real life because he was a man. Now he's tried to come back. He's tried to transition back. He's not alcoholic. He's not taking antidepressants. He's not taking anxiety meds or anything like that. And he is living a happier and healthier life. The gentleman's first name is Peter. I can't remember his last name. It escapes me, but we'll put it into the notes once I'll look it back up and we'll put it into notes at the end of the show as well. So
awesome. I just want to say one last thing about that.
Yeah.
definitely in response to what you're saying there, that pain in your head when you have gender dysphoria, there is an abstract pain like depression, trauma, especially, that's going on. You cannot fix, this abstract pain by doing physical alterations. Like people who cut themselves and people who do drugs, those are all physical things that people turn to because of the pain that they feel in their head, the mental pain. So you're not curing anything by transitioning when you have gender dysphoria.
I think that's a good way to wrap up that segment on the political correctness culture, on gender dysphoria and transgenderism. So that actually brings us to our speed round. It'd be kind of cool if we had like sponsors or something like that to like segue into each segment, right?
Yeah.
But we'll get there eventually. But so speed round. So essentially, each of us are going to get a minute to respond. One of us is going to read a headline, and then, like I said, each of us are going to get a minute to respond. So I have the first one for you. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So this is from the LA Times. So it's gonna be a good one. It says, after straw ban, California builds a non-plastic future. Cosette, go.
Okay. First thing I want to say is, can we just cut California from the United States? We don't need it. Secondly, the first thing that I think of are those gross paper straws. Have you tried them? They're disgusting.
Oh yeah, they're nasty. Yeah. Actually, I refuse to use them. Actually.
Yeah, those paper straws wrapped in single wrap plastic. So I don't know how that's any better. I don't know. But also, so listen. So Asia is responsible for most of the garbage in our oceans. And we'll put that statistic up on the screen. But also look up the Helmholtz study, revealing that about 90% of garbage comes from 10 rivers, 8 in Asia and 2 in Africa. You really think banning straws is going to solve any of those statistics? Not likely.
No, and I totally agree with you. And I know you're going to put this up on the screen once we have the video, but I'd just like to go over these statistics briefly just to reinforce your point. But it's talking about countries polluting the oceans the most. And so it breaks it down into two different categories. It breaks it down into mismanaged plastic waste and then plastic marine debris. And at the top of everyone by a long shot is China. China has, on a yearly basis, contributes 8.8 million pounds of mismanaged plastic waste. And then plastic marine debris, they have 3.53 million pounds of plastic waste in the ocean every year. Now, if you go all the way down the list to the United States, we have 0.3 million pounds of mismanaged plastic waste and 0.11 million plastic marine debris. So with marine debris, China has 350% more debris than we do, and nearly 8 times as much mismanaged plastic waste as we do. If you take the top 12, 8 of the top 12 of the largest contributors to marine waste are from Asia. Now the problem is when we get to like summits and such like that, like we just saw Greta Thunberg when she was talking about how we've stolen her childhood or whatever the case may be, and she was criticizing these first world countries and such like that. The problem is the first world countries, we have our recycling programs are actually quite good. The biggest contributors are China, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Sri Lanka. Like those are the top 5 right there. We need to be talking to the Asian summits. We need to be talking at those places to get that under control. That's how we're actually going to be able to mismanage the plastic waste. Because I don't want to sound heartless. I love the turtles just as much as everyone else, but I just think that we need to take a different approach to it.
I agree with you, Adley. So I have an article for you now. A headline. Are you ready?
Yeah. Where are we coming from?
We're coming from CNN here.
The most trusted voice in news?
The most trusted voice in news? You're right.
All
How could they say anything wrong?
No, of course not.
All right. So here's the headline. Fewer guns means fewer killings, and we all know it. 1 minute, go.
All right. So, absurd. Right off the bat. The UK, they did a gun ban, right? Because there was so much gun violence, right? They took all the guns off the streets. Knife attacks went up. So they ended up, get this, they ended up taking like mailboxes, and they put them in the middle of sidewalks, and they called them knife drop bins, where people could drop off their knives because they started doing a knife ban because knife attacks went up. Guess what went up after the knife ban went up? Acid attacks. People would take acid and throw it on each other. The fact of the matter is like violent people are going to be violent people. They're gonna try to find a way to hurt each other. They're gonna find a way to kill each other. That's just how it is. Sad, but that's how it is. And so the way that you can help people defend against each other is honestly more guns. If you look at the safest states in the United States, they're the ones with the most guns in it. Utah, Texas, those places have the largest per capita guns to people, and they have some of the lowest crime rates. Obviously, if you're looking at like urban Houston or urban Texas, something like that, obviously it's an urban area, so the crime is going to be higher. But if you're talking about more rural places with better gun values, they're going to be lower killings. You look at Chicago, you look at New York, where there are gun-free zones. That's where a lot of the murders happen in the United States. If you look at all the mass shootings we've ever had, most of them happen in gun-free zones. If I'm a criminal, I'm going to go to a place I know where the lowest chance of the people are going to have guns are. If I'm going to rob a house and I know that person has a gun, I'm not going to, I know there's a higher possibility of that person having a gun. I don't want to go to that house because there's a chance I'm going to get shot.
Of course, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Fewer guns meaning fewer killings. No, that killer's gonna kill. Sorry to tell you. No, more guns. We need more guns. O'Rourke, looking at you.
Very good. Well, I have the third headline for you, Cosette. It is from the Wall Street Journal. It's Antifa attacks a journalist. Andy Ngo is beaten as he attempts to cover a Portland protest. Ready, go.
This doesn't surprise me. Like, I'm surprised that I'm not surprised at this at all. Antifa is the most hypocritical group I have ever seen in my life, other than feminism. They use anti-fascist tactics while claiming to be anti-fascists.
Mm-hmm.
They use intimidation, they use violence, they're attacking journalists. Wearing masks? If you're doing something good, why wear a mask? Why hide your face? And they want to say out with the Nazis, out with the KKK, but they're behaving like the KKK and thinking like the Nazis, condemning anyone in that dreaded red MAGA hat.
And while you were talking, I was actually thinking of like the Nazis and like the SS and like the fear tactics they would use. And the thing is the Nazis at first they just went after different types of individuals. Like they went after gypsies, they went after Jews, they went after foreigners after that. Like they had like the different like phases they went through, and they'd go after people and they would kick them out of the society and such like that, and kind of like demonize those types of people, because if you demonize the type of person, then it's a lot easier to change the entire public's opinion of that type of people. And so when Antifa comes and they attack a journalist and they say he's doing like incorrect things, or they say, oh, older white men or older white people in general are evil and they are fascists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just an easier way of them changing public opinion to get rid of them, which is a classic fascist tactic. If you look at the Nazis, if you look at the KKK, if you look at Italy during Mussolini's time. So I totally agree with you. It's interesting how they claim to be attacking one thing, however, they're using the exact same tactics that they're trying to fight against.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Excuse me. All right, so I got another headline for you.
Yeah.
All right, so this comes from the Salt Lake Tribune, which is actually, despite popular belief, is very liberal. All right, so the headline is, medical marijuana backers threaten to sue over LDS church involvement in compromise bill to replace Prop 2.
Man, you're kind of burning a mistake, aren't you?
1 minute, go.
All right, so this is going to take longer than a minute. I'll try and be as concise as I possibly can. Essentially, I don't know if you were here during this, but what happened is this Proposition 2 was a proposition to put to the vote to the public. It was over whether Utah's going to be able to use medical marijuana or not. Now, what happened was the LDS church had come out against this medical marijuana bill. Everyone demonized the church. They said that the church they hated like people that use marijuana, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When in reality, what happened is the LDS Church came out and said, look, we support medical marijuana. We support the benefits of medical marijuana. They came out in an official report and said this. They said the problem is this bill, this proposition is full of loopholes. It's full of problems. It's going to allow for recreational use instead of medical use. And the reason I know that is because I read the entire bill myself. It was like 27, 30 pages. I read the entire thing to myself, and it was full of loopholes. There was people like after 5 years, you were going to be able to like grow your own marijuana in your backyard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like, yeah, it said you were only supposed to have like 5 plants or something like that. But who's going to go verify that, you know? And so tons and tons of problems with that. Now, when the church stood up against that, a lot of people were like, well, there needs to be a separation of church and state. This is the LDS Church overstepping their boundaries. Like, no, it isn't. Because the thing is, church and state honestly isn't even a constitutional thing. It was like a letter written. It was like written in a letter from one founding father to another. It wasn't even like part of the Constitution. You never find the words church and state in the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, anything like that. What they meant by church and state, though, is that the religion was not supposed to be the government. It wasn't supposed to be a theocracy where the priests were your senators and stuff like that. That's what it meant. And in fact, Antonin Scalia, who was a Supreme Court justice, he said something along the lines of, he said that the founding fathers meant for government to not be able to choose between religions, but he did not mean for the government to choose between God and irreligion or godlessness. It always favored that we were a godly nation, whether your God be Allah, whether your God be Jesus, whether your God be God, whether your God be Buddha. I don't know. I know that God isn't Buddha for the Buddhists, but whatever your deity is, we are supposed to be a godly nation, just not irreligious. And so that was the first problem with that. The second problem that people would come up with the LDS Church with the medical marijuana is they said, well, if the church is going to come out against that and be in the public figure, then they should lose their 501c tax status, meaning that they shouldn't be able to be a nonprofit. They shouldn't be a tax-free status. And my response to that was, okay, fine. They lose it. But guess who else loses their 501c tax status if you do that? On the left, you have the NAACP. You have Planned Parenthood. In the middle, you have the Red Cross. On the right, you have the NRA. All of these nonprofits, all these charities, the Clinton Foundation, all of these charities are 501c tax status, and they all give money to different factions, and they're all left or right leaning and such like that. So if you take away the LDS Church tax status, but to be intellectually honest, you have to take away the NAACP, Planned Parenthood, NRA, and all of the rest of them as well, because they all give money to different political parties. They all give money to different campaigns and such like that because they have their standards. The LDS Church being involved in the political arena is not a problem. It's not a problem any more than Planned Parenthood being in the political arena. It's not a problem any more than NRA being in the political arena, because they have people in there that care about how this country is going, and thus they're willing to put money where they see fit.
Right. No, I agree with you, especially on that medical marijuana thing. That was something I used to be against, just because I used to smoke a little bit too much. And so after I quit everything, I definitely didn't want to see another thing again. But I do understand that it has certain medical properties that could be beneficial to, people with PTSD, people with cancer, people with anxiety, people with depression, things like that. And so now I stand with the church as well on that subject too. Speaking of the church, one of our polls received a what do you call it?
A request?
A request. There you go. A request for us to talk about our LDS faith. We are both belonging to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they just wanted to know a little bit more about it. I don't know, explain it a little bit. Adley, you were a missionary. I wasn't. I think you're a little bit better to handle this question.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about this. We could talk about this for a really long time. But essentially, just to put in a brief 1-minute synopsis of what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is we believe and we know that Jesus Christ, when he was on this earth, he established a church. He established that church with apostles, with scripture, with priesthood being the power of God given to men to act in God's name. That's how Jesus Christ was able to perform so many miracles. That's how his apostles were able to perform so many miracles, was by that power. Now we believe that when Jesus Christ was crucified and ascended to heaven, and after all of the apostles were killed, that power, with them being the only ones that have that power, it was lost. And with that, the power to be able to interpret the scriptures correctly as well was lost. That's why we have so many different types of transcriptions of the Bible nowadays. We believe that power and the organization of that church was restored by through Jesus Christ by a prophet named Joseph Smith. A lot of people have heard that name. They scorn it. They think that we worship him, whatever the case may be. No, we believe that he's a prophet, a man that was called to do a great work by the hand of God. Now, we believe that we are that. We believe and we know that we are that same church that Jesus Christ originally established on this earth, with the same organization of prophets, apostles, the priesthood, and to be able to interpret the scriptures correctly. So, just in a brief synopsis, that is what we believe. If they wanted something a little more in depth, whether it be about why we don't drink coffee or something like that, we'd have to get into that a little bit differently. But that's essentially on the outside what our church is.
Thanks, Adley. I think I want to get baptized now.
Oh, great. Oh, man. Oh, man. All right. Well, let's transition from that. Let's segue into something different right there. So we're going to be talking about for our we're on our very last of the speed round. Awesome. All right. So, I have another headline for you, Gazette.
I'm ready.
Man, you're going to like this one. I feel like you're going to like it at least.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
You sure?
I'm sure.
I don't know if you're ready. Okay, let's try this. So, this is from the good old NY Times, New York Times, right? It says, "How can I cure my white guilt? The thing about privilege is that it can be used for good." That's the subtitle. 3, 2, 1, go.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what does that even mean? Privilege can be used for good. I mean, is it saying that white people are responsible for the good of people of color? I saw once this video of a white man. He was saying, because I'm a white man, I need to speak up for people of color. To which I say, are you saying that because I am an Asian woman, I can't speak for myself? Is that what that's saying there? The thing about privilege is it doesn't exist. The white privilege, the race privilege and stuff. If you think it does, then you're the racist. And what I can expand upon that is, how do you end your white guilt? You have to end race, and no one should feel guilty for being white. No one. And if you think someone should feel guilty for being white, then you're the racist. To think of somebody as having white privilege is racist itself. Because if I look at you and see your skin color, I make the judgment that you have a privilege that I don't have. That's still a judgment based on skin color, which is racist.
And yeah, no, I agree with you. And one thing that I hate about the term like white guilt or like white privilege or something like that, when you say that, what does that say to young African Americans or young Asians or young Latin Americans, young Hispanics? It's like saying like, oh, well, you're already playing from behind the 8 ball. Like you aren't going to be able to make anything of your life, when that's not true. Like if you look at a lot of the distinguished minority people that have come from hard backgrounds, for example, Elijah Cummings, the senator from Maryland. I mean, obviously I don't agree with him in hardly anything politically. He just passed away this last week. I mean, we pray for his family, but he came from like a sharecropper. He's a sharecropper son. Like he fought. He wanted to be a lawyer from a very young age, and his teacher told him to quit to not be a lawyer. And his first client as a lawyer was that teacher. I mean, Hollywood ending, but that's how it was. If you look at, for example, LeBron James, he came from Akron, Ohio. I mean, obviously, like we have our opinions on who he is politically, but I mean, he came from the slums of Akron. He's become arguably one of the best basketball players in the history of the NBA. If you look at some of the baseball players that have come from the Dominican Republic or Central and Latin America, if you look at all these different things, if you tell people that there's white privilege and they're automatically living from behind the eight ball. What is that telling them? That they aren't going to be able to have a good life? Like, there's plenty of people that have lived that American dream of being able to come out of that. You know, you had a really good point I wanted to make on it, but yeah, what I had was what I had, I guess.
All right, sounds good. Should we move on?
Yes, let's move on. So this is the last 10-minute segment, and then we'll go into Sleep, Kiss, Kill, and then we'll be all done with this episode. All right. So, so this is the ideals of the Democratic Party, the history behind the Democratic Party. So I just wanted to kind of give you a chronological history, just essentially so people can get an idea of what it is we're talking about. So, the reason I'm talking about this is because a lot of people feel that the Democratic Party is the party of minorities, that they're the ones that have always stood up for example, Latin Americans are the ones that have always stood up for the Black community and such like that. Now, after doing this research, I don't know how they are, but that's what it is. So, for example, if we go all the way back to the 1860s, if we go back to the Civil War, which was fought largely on actually the basis of state versus federal rights, but also slavery was a big part of that. Also, what was the result of the Civil War was the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, right? So the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery, right? So if you were to ask anyone on the street, whether it was Republicans or Democrats that voted for slavery, a lot of people might think that Republicans voted for slavery and Democrats voted against it, correct? When in reality, the 13th Amendment passed by a vote of 119 to 56. All 56 of those that voted against the 13th Amendment for outlawing slavery were all Democrats. If you look at the 14th Amendment, which was the reverse Dred Scott, it was due process and equal protection clauses. It passed the House 144 to 44 with 35 not voting. Now the 44 were all Democrats, and a majority of the 35 were Democrats as well that didn't vote. Now, a small exception to that being there's 3 Republicans that voted against it, but the reason they voted against it because they didn't believe it actually went far enough. They didn't want that. They actually wanted to go further than what it already did protect. The 15th Amendment, that was the states couldn't deny right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now, this one was interesting. It said that the House of Representatives passed the amendment with 143 Republican and 1 conservative Republican voting yes, and then 39 Democrat, 3 Republican, 1 independent Republican, 1 conservative voting no. 26 Republican, 8 Democrat, and 1 independent Republican not voting. So we can see that through the 13, 14, 15 minutes, the Civil War amendments, that Republicans were heavily in favor of those amendments, and the Democrats were heavily against those. If you keep looking further in history, 22 Black Republicans after the 13, 14, and 15 amendments were passed. 22 Black Republicans served in Congress by 1900. Democrats didn't elect their first Black congressman until 1935. Nathan Bedford Forrest, who started the Ku Klux Klan, was a Democrat. He was a registered Democrat and voted Democrat. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was actually, the nickname of that bill was the N-word bill by Lyndon B. Johnson, who actually reportedly used the N-word quite a bit in his private conversations with senators. In fact, when the Civil Rights Act came through in 1964, he initially 80% of Republican congressmen supported it, and less than 70% of Democratic congressmen supported it. It was actually filibustered by the Democrats for 75 days. But then Democrats kind of had to change how they're like, well, if Black people are going to vote, we're going to have them vote Democrat. And there's a book actually written by Ronald Kessler, and he was the author of Inside the White House. He reported that in a private conversation. Lyndon B. Johnson in 1963 said, I'll have them N-words voting Democrat for 200 years. And I mean, to this day, they do vote Democrat. So essentially what happened is they just kind of like, they switched their rhetoric, and they're like, yeah, we'll go for some civil rights activism and such like that. And they've just embraced it ever since then, when in reality, the entire Democratic Party has been rooted in racism until the 70s, 80s, you know? Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to give you that information as a backdrop to your response, right?
Right. So first thing I think of, you mentioned a switch, and I don't believe that there was a big switch between the parties. I don't believe that overnight all Democrats became colorblind and all Republicans became racist. I don't believe that that happened. I could sit here and debunk that and mention the Southern strategy and everything, even with the how the Democrats waited 30 years to even ditch their own party at that point, the whole shebang. But the point I want to get to is Democrats still think they own Black people. They still think they own the Black vote. And the reason I think this is because Democrats encourage Blacks to rely on big government and to rely on the welfare system. They encourage that, and so that they can look like heroes, in my opinion, so that they can get that vote. If someone is of color, a Black person who believes that they better vote Democrat because they're Black is still a slave, I believe. You know, Democrats always push, they always think in race. If you think of, you know, any Democrat, they can look at a group of white people. You know, these white people could be doctors, lawyers, teachers, plumbers, gay, straight, rich, poor. They're all the same because they're white. And that's very racist way of thinking. Another hypocrisy here is that they treat Black people like they need to be catered to like children. They treat them like they are incapable of achieving such high goals and high success. And they act like it's white people's fault, which is racist. Again, the Democrats just have been salty ever since we took away their slaves.
No, and I agree with you that if you sell out because of like you sell out to someone because of like your background, your skin color, or whatever it may be, I think that that's just as bad as slavery as well. For example, when Mitt Romney was running for president in 2012, everyone just kind of assumed, oh, like, well, he's gonna win Utah easily. Well, they're all Mormon, right? And the fact that they just kind of assumed that all Mormon people were going to vote for Mitt Romney because they shared the same faith with him, that was kind of absurd in my opinion. The fact that people, for example, I've on many occasions criticized Mitt Romney, but people say like, hey, but like, and I've said this in previous episodes in my podcast, like, but Mitt Romney's Mormon, you're Mormon, like, aren't you supposed to get along? Like, no, that's not how it works. Like, when 2012 came around and people said, oh, I like President Obama because he's Black, I'm like, that's not a good reason for it. Or I like, especially here in Utah, I like Mitt Romney, he's LDS. I'm like, no, that's not a good idea either. Like, if you can honestly say, like, honestly back up the reasoning why you like Mitt Romney, or honestly back up the reason why you like Barack Obama, I'm going to respect your opinion because you at least have thought about your opinion, you have an educated opinion. You know, we can have a debate, we can have a political discussion on why it is, you know. But to simply sell out to someone just because of ideology or something like that, it's dangerous because you're selling yourself out. So I completely agree with you on the idea of selling out and the idea of kind of expecting or owning a vote because you are a certain background or culture or skin color. I think that is ridiculous.
Right, and I agree with you in that sense. I actually, by the way, have a picture of myself with Mitt Romney. He came to my church in Florida once during the debates.
Did he?
We'll put that up on the screen. Yay for me. But anyways, I liked your point about, you know, expecting or thinking that you deserve that vote because of someone's background or skin color. That's exactly how the feminists use their identity politics. Is, you know, I've said, you know, what I've been told a million times by other feminist women. Why aren't you feminist? You're a woman. How is that any different than saying you're a woman? Why aren't you in the kitchen? I mean, it's the same thing, and they don't realize that identity politics is just as sexist, just as racist as they claim the Republicans to be.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a I really like that. And I'd like to do another episode where we get to talk about a little bit of feminism because I honestly don't know a ton about feminism. I think that'd be fun to do another episode talking about feminism, talking about some other things that we didn't, because we actually got a lot of response back from viewers on topics they want to cover and stuff like that. we saw that the list, we only got through probably a third of the topics that were given to us, and we tried to fit in as many as we could doing speed rounds and such like that. So I think doing another episode would be fantastic. But that's the end of that last segment. So we are going to slip into Sleep Kiss Kill. But we're going to do it with the Democrat nomination. However, we're going to do, instead of Sleep Kiss Kill, we're going to do who we want to win. Who, like, if all of us, obviously us being conservative, like if we had to have someone who we prefer to win, who we think will win, and who we do not want to win. Okay, so I'm going to go first right now. Who I want to win, I'm going to have to go with Uncle Joe. I'm going to have to go with Joe Biden. He's the only electable patriot on the stand. I believe that, for example, Tulsi Gabbard, she served in the military. I believe that she's a patriot. However, I believe that Joe Biden genuinely loves America and actually believes that there's good in America. I feel like there's a lot of hateful speech and a lot of negative views on America as a whole from the other presidential candidates. And so I really kind of respect the way that Joe Biden thinks about America in that aspect. Compared to everyone else, he's a moderate, which is ridiculous because if you would have asked me 8 years ago if Joe Biden was a moderate, I would have called you crazy. He still thinks that Republicans are like good people. He'd be willing to work across the aisle. He actually has a lot of friends, and people have said like he's a good guy. He just has bad policy, which is fine. You can work with that. You can debate with that. You can negotiate with that. And he's mostly constitutional. For example, in one of the debates, they were talking about gun control, and he was talking about how they have to be careful about doing gun control because there's like so many different rules and so many factors, and obviously like the Second Amendment being a thing. But Kamala Harris interrupted him and said, "Joe, why don't we say yes we can instead of no we can't?" And everyone started like applauding for her, and he's like, "Well, let's be constitutional about this," because he understands that there's still constitutional rights that should and will be upheld, if not by the government, by the people. And then I think that he has a higher level of electability than most other candidates. I believe that, he was a senator before he was the vice president, so he's won, and he has that electability status. I don't think that anyone else has that kind of status above it. And then let's have you do your want, and then we can go back and forth.
So who I want to win is Tulsi Gabbard. I like her mainly because of her immigration views. She wants a secure border. She wants to put American citizens first. And another reason is her old views on gay marriage were the same as mine. She since apologized for it, for her being against gay marriage and things like that. But there's still a conservative in that regard.
Well, the fact that she came out and like apologized, something that I think that shows a little bit of humility. I don't know how much like humility it shows as much as she was just scared of the media, but it does. I think that's a good trait in a leader is humility.
I agree with that also, and I think she is more of a classical Democrat than she is than a lot of these other candidates are. They're kind of very, very far left, and she is not. And so I do appreciate that.
Plus, she's beautiful. So there's that. But who I think will win. So I actually had Elizabeth Warren put as who I think will win. I'm gonna throw a curveball though. You know who I think is gonna win?
Who?
I think bear with me. I think either Hillary Clinton is gonna win or Michelle Obama. After that fourth Democratic debate that we just had, all of the pundits are like, they're kind of like, because now that was the first time they're all on the same stage, like debating against each other, and a lot of the pundits were like, "This is actually really weak, presidential field. That's really weak." And then last week, Hillary Clinton did an interview where she's like, "Oh, if I was to run again, I could win it." And yeah, if she was to pull in, she would win that nominee. Whether she could beat Donald Trump is a different question, but whether she would win the nomination, she most likely win the nomination. And then in some polls out east where they're saying, "Oh, if Michelle Obama entered the race, would you vote for her?" And she was beating out Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't by like 1 or 2%. It was like 8%, like 10% that she was beating these guys out. And so I don't believe the winner of the Democratic Party has entered the race yet, whether it be Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama. I doubt it, but like Oprah or something like that. I think that the winner of the Democratic nomination isn't in the race yet. I think they're waiting for the opportune time and they're going to jump in a little bit later and win the Democratic nomination. That's what I think, though.
That's interesting. That's interesting. You know who I think will win?
Who's that?
I think Elizabeth Warren. As much as I kind of don't like her, I think her views on capitalism appeal to most, and her wanting to tax the ultra rich is kind of an idea that most people, when they first hear about it, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then another thing is that she wants a government that people can trust. Do you trust your government, Adley?
No,
I don't either. I don't think that'll ever happen in a million years. But, that appeals to most, that idea. And, she's a Native American princess. I mean, who doesn't want that?
Okay. What was it, 1,024th or something like that?
Hey, it doesn't matter. She's Native American, okay? You can't say anything about it now. It's 2019.
It's fair. Just how I can't say anything about you being an attack helicopter, right?
Right.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so moving on to our don't want to win the Democratic nomination. I don't want Elizabeth Warren to win. Oh my goodness, the reason I don't want her is because I think she can actually do some damage. I think she can actually win. Reason being, the media love her. She makes the media feel so good about themselves. She makes them feel like so smart. They're like, oh, she's so elegant. She's a Harvard law professor. She's so well put together, and she makes us feel really good. So they give her a lot of media love. Obviously that hyper rich tax, which I think is ridiculous. Her Medicare plan would cost $30 trillion over the next 10 years. That's like increase. That would be increasing our federal budget by 75%. Right now it's $4.4 trillion per year. She'd be adding another $3 trillion on top of that.
Jeez.
And then, like you said, with the hyper rich tax, she's like, yeah, we'll pay with the hyper rich tax. The top 20% of the U.S. pays 80% in income tax. 87%, excuse me. The top 20% pay the top 87% income tax. I don't know how much you can tax the wealthy. Anyways,
yeah,
she's a socialist. She has a moral high ground against Trump, I guess you could say, because I mean, she's married. She doesn't have quite as many scandals as Trump. I mean, obviously, Trump hasn't been able to dig in and find dirty secrets about her. Which that's the thing is Trump. That's where Trump's that's where his advantage is. We already know that personally he's a scumbag. Yeah. I voted for Trump. I know that he's a scumbag, but it was Trump or Hillary Clinton. I mean, let's be real here, Yeah. But that's what Trump's really good is. He's really good about taking his political opponent and dragging him down into the mud as well. He's like, I'm going to bring you down. I'm going to beat you on my level, And so I don't think that once she wins the nomination, she will win the presidency because I think that Trump will, say what you want. Hillary Clinton is very good at the political game, and Donald Trump wiped the floor with her at the debates. He was just that much better at the debates. And Elizabeth Warren isn't a strong enough personality. She isn't a strong enough person to go against Donald Trump in the debates. And so that's what I think, but I do not want her to win because I think she's very dangerous.
No, I agree with you. But I also agree with the fact that if Donald Trump even breathes on her wrong, she'll crumble. That's fair. But
stinky breath.
Yeah. Who I don't want to win is Beto O'Rourke. Beto? Is it Beto?
Beto O'Rourke.
Beta male O'Rourke. He wants to take our guns.
Oh my gosh.
He wants to take our guns. Okay, I think that's reason enough. I think he's childish in his policies. I think he's childish altogether. Mm-hmm. I really don't like him. He wants to quit politics if he doesn't win. I quit. I didn't win. This game's not fair. That's all I see when I hear about it. I think every time I see Beta Male O'Rourke, I just want to laugh.
No, yeah, and I agree with you. Beto, one thing I will give Beto though, he is the most. Between him and Bernie, they're the most honest about their policies. Joe Biden's really good at being the politician. He won't answer a question directly. Elizabeth Warren still hasn't come out with exactly how she's gonna do her Medicare plan and stuff like that. Bernie Sanders is yeah, like we're gonna raise taxes on everyone because I'm a socialist. That's how it goes. Like costs are gonna rise, but you're gonna get free healthcare out of it. And Beto, like at least he's honest, but he's like, yeah, we're gonna take your guns. And if you don't, it's a mandatory buyback program. That's how he wants to get rid of it. And if you don't do the mandatory buyback program, we're gonna have law enforcement officials enter your home and like confiscate them from you. Like I can give him that. At least he's being honest, like he doesn't hide anything. Whether it helps him or not is a completely different thing. But he's being honest, right?
Right. Honesty is the best policy.
Honesty is the best policy. Unless you're a Democrat trying to win a nomination. But no, and I think that wraps it up for us, Cosette. I just want to thank all the viewers and all the people that are supporting us and giving us love and sending in comments and giving us commentary and such like that. We should want to thank you guys so much for being a part of this episode, which was great. It was a nice episode between the Salty Circus and Millennial Soapbox. We went over a lot of different things today. We went over border control. We went over political correctness. We went over straw bans. We went over guns. We went over Antifa. We went over religion and politics, especially the LDS faith. We went over white guilt. We went over the chronological history of the Democratic Party, and then we talked about the Democratic nominees as well. So I think that was a pretty good episode. And sadly, we only got to about a third of what was given to us. So I feel like we have some work cut out for us, though, right?
I agree. Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Adley, and thank you, viewer, for watching. If you liked this episode, if you loved this episode, go ahead and subscribe to our channels and leave a review and a comment below. I will link our social medias and our and our channels here, and yeah. So thank you so much. I'm signing off. My name is Salty Circus, also Cosette.
I'm Abby Wilson from the Millennial Soapbox. Thank you for listening and have a fantastic day.